investigations at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And if I would bring someone in as an instructor, I would invite them to stay for the entire course. We can't certify them, obviously, as law enforcement, but they were certainly welcome to attend the training. But I'll emphasize this again. Plug into your local Electronic Crimes Task Force with the Secret Service. Join High Tech Crime Investigators Association. And come to us on the CyberCop portal, where you can collaborate with other people of the same ilk, people involved in protecting our nation's infrastructure. You know, our job is basically to help to drive this whole idea of the initiative from the White House to protect cyberspace. So you're the ones you're going to be the first responders oftentimes to these things. So if you want to collaborate with law enforcement, hopefully I have given you a couple of places where you can do that.
Just as a side note, that was also one of the reasons why Brett Padres and I had started the Cyberspeak podcast, kind of an asynchronous way of getting information out there. And a lot of the things that we talk about is, while it's not official classes, there are a lot of incident responders, a lot of people in the computer security business that can't go to these classes or don't have the time to go to these classes. So once a week, for a little over a year and a half, we've been putting out shows, and some of the shows deal with just that type of thing. Okay, well, what are the best handling methods? What things do you need to be aware of? Why do you not want to just do certain things when you're responding to an incident? We've also brought in a lot of the people, the speakers that you hear here at BlackHat. I think we've had them on the podcast to interview them so they can talk a little bit more, and it's something that people can download and listen to. Again, we've even had tool writers come on and do step-by-steps on how to use their tools. So it's just trying to help get the information out there.
One other thing that we're doing at the Defense Cyber Crime Center is, with 90 examiners, you might find this hard to believe, but some of these guys are pretty geeky, and you can tell the extroverts from the introverts, because when they walk down the hall, they'll look at your shoes. But they encounter a challenge, in a forensic exam, and we have some really smart guys that have been there 6, 7, 8 years, and they'll go out and research, solve that problem, they'll write it up, move on to the next case, not share how they did that with anyone. A month or two later, a brand new rookie's been out there for 3 or 4 months, gets the same challenge, researches it, doesn't solve it, doesn't ask anybody. And so what we had to do is we're building a knowledge base internally in our intranet to capture those tips and tricks. And so I got funded for a PhD Intel analyst and a senior digital forensic examiner. And these two guys, every time there's a new anomaly or a new challenge that an examiner encounters in an exam, their job is to research, figure out how to do this, and write it up and make it available in a knowledge base for everybody else. We thought that folks like yourselves ought to have access to this. So in collaboration with Oklahoma State University, we're building a national repository for digital forensics intel. So you're going to have to be law enforcement. We'll have a secure portal, and we're going to put this kind of information so that when you have a question, how do I do this? We're going to leverage the technology and make it available to you. So support us with a national repository by using it and by plugging stuff in. So the prototype ought to be ready by mid-August for several different law enforcement agencies. But it'll be open to federal, state, and local law enforcement, as well as Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Gentlemen, John Michael Brook with the Roosties Corporation, right over here. Dr. Wells, you mentioned earlier about return on investment. How do you quantify ROI with losses versus risk? Losses of somewhere on the order of $135 billion per hour just for Bank of America going down, or $3 trillion per day with the federal networks going down.
So how do you apply that to a defense environment? So how do you, you can make a whole series of risk management calculations in the financial sphere. MasterCard, I'm willing to accept 3% losses on my credit cards, whatever, I make that up in the billing charges. I don't know if anybody has gone to the top secret control officer lately and said it's okay to lose 3% of your documents every year. And so what we're trying to do basically is to set up a situation where you have network-centric operations, you have massive expansion of sharing of information, but we're trying to do it in essentially a zero-risk environment as the underpinning. And so we need that sort of to take the model and morph it from the private sector, where you have clear return on investment, clear risk gain, to a much less tangible situation involving lives and policies and effects of operations. And that's what's hard to do.
Let me add another little insight into ROI. ROI is not just return on investment. Thanks to Sarbanes-Oxley, also known as the Accountants Full Employment Act, there's also a thing called risk of indictment. And as the CEO and as a board member, you have a fiduciary obligation to the shareholders to make sure that your systems are adequately protected. If you don't, you just not only lose companies' assets, you also run the risk of losing your own personal assets and a deprivation of liberty. It's called jail.
But let me make one point. If I am defining what my target value is a clean opinion from an accounting firm, that's not real security. There are companies that have failed and failed miserably on the day they were awarded their clean opinion on their financial statement. So it has to be real. Somebody comes up and gets an A on a scorecard and I still get in. So that's why I made my point earlier relative to my NSA colleague that there has been no private sector eligible receiver. There has been no civilian government eligible receiver. And unless and until you can make it that real, then the numbers that you're throwing out there are nice, but it's just monopoly money. I mean, you have to show people real loss. I don't know how many of you were lucky enough to listen to Gotti speak in the earlier session in this room, but people lost things. I mean, they weren't able to get gas. They weren't able to get food. We were talking about milk and eggs and gasoline and bread in Estonia during the flood that was hitting them. He describes it as cyber warfare and a cyber riot. It could be a cyber invasion. You can use whatever term you want, but unless and until it's truly concrete, then how do you measure? You can take all the metrics you want, but they have to add up to a measurement at some point.
That's what I'm saying is right now there's $3 trillion a day going on in financial transactions.
Well, there's $702 trillion every year just cleared relative to stock transactions. So I mean, you're talking about, this is a great target. I mean, that is a real plum out there. If you're doing threat, vulnerability, impact equals risk, the threat's real, the vulnerability's real, and the target is real.
Risk is there, and that's what I'm getting at, is how do you go through and actually quantify some sort of ROI, which is what you brought up earlier, that you need that in order to get
So let's just take a note here. The infrastructure you're talking about is owned by the private sector by and large. It's certainly not owned by the Department of Defense. And so the arguments that we're trying to make are, what about the return on investments in the defense infrastructure? Because frankly, when we've gone to some of the private sector and said, hi, we're the feds, we're here to help, let's collaborate, we've not gotten welcomed with open arms. In addition, there are limits, both legal and fiscal, to how far DOD is going to be able to go out and actually work at defending the domestic infrastructure, not to mention the fact that it's really the province of the Department of Homeland Security. So I take the points you're making. I'm arguing those calculations are almost in a different sphere from what we are dealing with, where the particular point I made up on return on investment within the defense budget is how you convince the Army, Navy, Air Force to give up the fighter plane, tank, or ship in exchange for adding increased security to the network. And you just don't have the same kind of financial transaction calculus that you've raised in that type of situation.
Okay, appreciate all the questions. If we could have a round of applause for this panel, that would be great. Thanks, guys. Please grab the front row. Just grab the front row. Okay, I hope you're saving all the hard questions for the guys with the guns.
6.
All right, Jim, we're gonna start with you.
Oh, great. My name is Jim Finch. I'm the Assistant Director of the Cyber Division for the FBI, and that pretty much makes me responsible for all cyber investigations in the United States done by the FBI. Hey, is Rocky out there? I ran into a guy this week, and he asked me about his company, and he said he would be here, and I told him I'd never heard of his company, and he couldn't believe it. I wanted to tell him, geez, I've been getting answers from people for 26 years, and the last thing I want to do is give them the impression I know a lot about them. I then get no answer. So, Rocky, I'm sorry I lied to you. I have heard of your company, but I wanted you to tell me about it. Now, I've been with the FBI for 26 years, and I probably have in excess of, or I know I have in excess of 550, 600 people working cyber-based crimes in the United States and overseas. Still don't have enough based on the internet, but I love the internet, folks. I've been building computers for 20 years. I was a gamer when gaming wasn't cool, and I still build gaming machines, and I'm always learning, and I'm pretty excited to be here. As a matter of fact, this is probably the first time an assistant director has shown up at BlackHat or DEF CON, and you probably won't see it after me. However, I'm hoping more computer-savvy people will follow me. My director, for whatever reason, at some point in time decided he wanted someone running the cyber division who had a technical background. So I was plucked from my cozy job elsewhere in the country and brought back to Washington, D.C. to do what I consider is an honorable thing and investigate the crimes on the internet. And let me tell you, I see some things that I can't believe. But I tell people I liken the internet to one of those safe neighborhoods or one of those neighborhoods where it's pretty during the day and then at night it becomes a dangerous place. Well, the internet's like that, but it's a dangerous place all the time. And it's pretty all the time. I spend more time on the internet. As a matter of fact, I used to take time off, and my wife would tease me for taking time off to spend quality time with my computer. But that's just how I feel about technology. I'm constantly learning, and being here with you, the folks who are actually on the front lines in the private sector trying to secure a network that wasn't based on security. So you have one heck of a task in front of you. But for those who are using the internet for something other than legal